Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East as the midterms inch ever closer. Donald Trump's desperate quest to interfere in our elections becomes more and more audacious and more obvious by the day. His moves appear increasingly brazen with every new devastatingly low poll that is released. It's now clear that other than the American people themselves, judges will be our only line of defense against Donald Trump and his administration's attempt at election interference. Yesterday, in a scathing rebuke, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from allowing states to use its centralized citizenship database to cross-check the immigration status of their voters. In her decision, the judge wrote that states are, quote, actively removing U.S. citizens from voter rolls based on inaccurate information. All in all, the federal government has knowingly trampled on the privacy rights of American citizens in a manner that threatens the sacred right to vote. This court cannot stand idly by while that happens. It comes on the heels of a decision by another federal judge, this one a Trump-appointed one in Maryland, who blocked DOJ's efforts to obtain the state's voter rolls. As we brought you yesterday, she wrote this, quote, thus far, courts have dismissed 8 of these lawsuits on motions similar to the ones pending before this court. No court has ruled in favor of the U.S. to date. She added this, quote, the motion to compel will be denied. The dismissal of the claim will be with prejudice. Now, despite that stunning, unbroken losing streak, Donald Trump is undaunted and shows no signs of slowing down his quest to seize control of our elections, even if that quest imperils our national security. On that, CNN reports this, quote, the Trump administration is threatening to withhold tens of millions of dollars in federal homeland security funds from states unless they adopt a sweeping set of election changes. Under new rules governing several Homeland Security grant programs, states must take a number of steps, including phasing out certain electronic voting systems and moving to hand-marked paper ballots. They must also run their voter rolls through a controversial Department of Homeland Security citizenship verification database. The judiciary blocking Donald Trump at every turn as he tries every trick in the book to rig the midterms and take control of our elections is where we begin today with some of our most favorite experts and friends. Voting rights attorney, founder of Democracy Docket, Marc Elias, is back. Also joining us, former assistant special agent in charge of the FBI and national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg's back. Also back, NYU law professor, our legal analyst Melissa Murray. Marc Elias, I know you are the tip of the spear in these lawsuits, so just take me through the significance of these 2 defeats for the Trump efforts.
Yeah, it's really a big day yesterday when we got both of these. So first, for Donald Trump to try to rig the outcome of the 2026 elections, he is counting on building a national voter database. And once he has that, he will tell states who they can send ballots to and who they can't, who's eligible to vote and who's not. So in other words, he wants to create a list of all of the potential voters, remove the people he doesn't want to be able to vote, and then insist that only the people who remain on his list are able to vote. So the first part of that strategy requires him to get access to the state's voter files, because it turns out the federal government doesn't have such a list to begin with. It's never needed one. It still doesn't need one. So Donald Trump is trying to gain access to every state's complete voter file, which includes personal sensitive information like Social Security numbers, date of birth, and partisan information and the like. Well, they sued 31 states, and including the District of Columbia, and they are so far 0 for 9. My law firm and I, we intervened on behalf of voters to fight these lawsuits in all those states, and we are undefeated. The Department of Justice is without a single win. And I can tell you, as someone who is tracking all of the cases, both the ones that have been decided and the ones that have not, Donald Trump's Department of Justice is not going to see a victory anytime soon. Most of the hearings where we're waiting on final decisions did not go well for the Department of Justice. So I expect that their losses will increase and our victories will increase. The other case, though, is trying to tackle it, or is tackling it at the other end. And in this instance, what a federal judge in Washington, D.C. said was that actually the federal government can't use the SAVE database database, this big database that comes with Social Security information and the like, can't use that to screen out people and to run state voter rolls against it, citing the Privacy Act. So far, based on yesterday's results, the Department of Justice has been thwarted in getting the data and also using the existing databases towards this effort. But look, we know that they're not going to give up. We know that they are not one to necessarily comply with every court order. So we're going to keep fighting.
I mean, Mark, they're 0-9, right? So they've lost every single case that they've brought. But I wonder if it is far-fetched to wonder if Bill Pulte's practice of going into people's mortgages in his housing role and being thrust into this ODNI post. I mean, is it your sense that they want access to the information, whether a judge permits them to use it or not, to sow chaos? Or what is your sense of what their operation is about if every judge is blocking them?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First is, you are exactly right. They are 0-9. I predict that before long they will be 0-15. Like I said, just based on the court, how the courts have sort of teed these up. They are appealing these, so there are a number of these now in the courts of appeals. So that's something to watch. In terms of your question, though, so I think we need to understand that Donald Trump has two purposes here. The first is, as you say, it is to misuse this data to sow chaos. It is to remove people from the rolls and to lie that he's removing people from the rolls because they were fraudulently on. I mean, this is a guy who is right now lying about there having been a vandalism attack on the liner of the reflecting pool. And if he's willing to lie about that, you can only imagine what kind of lies he will tell about what's in this data. So he'll tell lies about there being illegal voters and the like. But the second part of this is that he is setting up the same grievance structure that you and I have been talking about now, really for 6 years, 7 years. And that is this, he announces something, he loses, he goes to court, he loses. And then he turns to, in the case of 2020, he then turned to violent insurrection in the nation's capital. We see him follow this pattern over and over again. So right now they are in the losing in court phase, and I'm glad to be part of that effort. But he's not going to end with that, right? He's next going to turn to the aggrievement phase, in which he inspires his supporters, or he gives a permission structure to Bill Pulte or to Todd Blanche to do even more extreme things like potentially even seize ballots.
I want to read a little bit more from the judge's decision, just so that before the disinformation floods the right-wing media ecosystem, it's clear how illegal this is and how blatantly unconstitutional the judge found it. This is from the judge's decision, quote, "The case implicates two fundamental rights that protect Americans from from government overreach, the right to privacy and the right to vote. In the past year, several federal agencies have joined forces to create a centralized federal database that contains the private information of U.S. citizens, including Social Security numbers, citizenship status, and other sensitive data. But decades ago, Congress put protections in place to prevent precisely this type of centralized data bank. And the record in this case shows that the federal agencies that created this database knew that the database violates those statutory protections." Michael Feinberg, I would put money on the fact that Republicans were on the side of creating the statutory protections in the first place. Republicans used to care a whole lot. And Republicans used to loathe more than just about anything the federal government having all of the personal data of every voter in the country. Now Republicans are the advocates for the state seizing all this personal data. And if the Republican base were awake and receiving accurate information, it would be absolutely furious if it had any of the traditional sensibilities that Republicans have had for either of our lifetimes.
Well, I've said this before to you. The Republican Party exists in name only at this point. It is functionally just a wing of a personalist regime that is completely unmoored and untethered to anything that most historical conservatives in the United States over the past 100 years would recognize as anything regarding a neutral principle. And it's important to note, in that judge's opinion, several references are made to protections of information that the government has on its citizens. And it's not just one law. It is an interwoven web of multiple laws. There are protections for general personally identifiable information in the Privacy Act. There is protection for student information in the Buckley Amendments. There is protection for health information in HIPAA. There is a litany of protection for tax information, which makes it difficult even for people like I used to be in the FBI to obtain that data. And the notion that the Department of Homeland Security, one of the most patchwork and newest governmental departments that we deal with, would have the sophistication or the wherewithal to on the fly create some sort of master database that complies with all those laws is lunacy. And there's one other important factor which the judge didn't mention, but everybody should know. You know, I worked with government databases my entire adult life, and they all have one thing in common. They are maintained by human beings, and they are based upon information furnished by human beings. And with those two variables comes human error. That you would use something susceptible to typos and misnomers and mistakes of the pen in order to deprive people of what is arguably the most fundamental right in our country is once again lunacy.